It's been said that a movie is only ever as good as its villain, and what better way to establish such a character than by putting them front and centre in the film's very first scene. These 10 movies all had such faith in their antagonist that they gave them the spotlights before even the hero of the story. Not only were these introductions done incredibly well, they also set the tone for what ultimately became fantastic films in their own right. I'm Cy for WhatCulture.com, and these are the 10 best movies where we meet the villain first. Number 10. X-Men First Class. After 3 movies exploring and dissecting the relationship between Charles Xavier and Eric Lehnsherr, X-Men First Class took the franchise decades into the past to see how the two iconic mutants first met. It was, at the time, exactly the reboot the franchise needed. The movie kicked off with a gut-wrenching scene as it followed a young Eric and his mother through a Nazi concentration camp in Poland in 1944. The two get separated, bringing the young man's anger to the point that he's able to destroy the metal gates, keeping them apart. The pace keeps going and quickly shifts to a young Charles Xavier, but the opening is enough to know about Eric's motivations in the movie, where his powers came from, what triggered him, and a deeper look into his heartbreaking past. For much of the movie, the man that would be called Magneto isn't actually a villain, instead working as a part of the X-Men himself. However, by the end, he's murdered Sebastian Shaw and split the X-Men in half, taking Mystique, Azazel, Angel and Riptide to form the Brotherhood. Fans all knew who Magneto was, but that further depth given by the opening scene was vital to crafting an even more compelling version of the character. Number 9. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. When it came to animated films, Disney got telling fantastic stories down to a science, and in doing so pretty much created a series of their own tropes and expectations. It's commonplace for movies from the House of Mouse to open with their antagonist. This goes right back to the first ever full-length animated feature in the Disney collection, however, 1937's Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. By kicking things off with the Queen and her insecurities, asking her magic mirror who is the fairest of them all, Disney not only set up the intentions of the piece's villain, but also a background hum of danger yet to come, and of course even their hero to some extent. Whilst the Queen and Snow White don't know each other, the scene immediately marks Snow White as a threat to the Queen's ego, and the two characters become linked. So while Snow White seems to be having a lovely time gallivanting around with the Seven Dwarfs and her Dr. Doolittle-esque command of forest animals, we as an audience know that something wicked this way comes. Whilst the scene is less than 90 seconds long, the sinister presentation of both the Queen and the mirror establish just what a malicious woman the film's villain is. Number 8. The Departed. There are a lot of moving pieces in The Departed, a lot of double crosses, hidden allegiances and character turns you never see coming. The one constant throughout the movie, however, is that Jack Nicholson's Costello always stayed on the wrong side of the law. No hidden agenda, just a criminal empire to run. While Billy and Colin pretended to be someone else and Dignam felt like he could kill anyone at any time, regardless of which side they were on, fans could really rely on Costello to be a straightforward bad guy. This was made obvious from the very beginning of the movie. Against the background of the rough streets of Boston, Costello speaks of his city before showing up to collect protection money. This also gives him the chance to meet with Colin, the man who he'd ultimately insert into the Boston Police Department as his inside man. There's a lot to take in throughout The Departed, but starting here and setting up two key antagonist players is the way to go. You could easily get lost in a story like this, but Costello gives you the true north that is needed right from the very start. Number 7. A Clockwork Orange. There are a few movies, if any, that are quite like A Clockwork Orange. Adapted from the 1962 novel of the same name by Anthony Burgess and brought to the screen by the genius mind of Stanley Kubrick, the movie has found itself in the realms of legendary since 1971. The movie's had a lot of publicity and discussion over the last 50 years, and not all of it in a positive light. Its excessive and often unprovoked violence, depictions of sexual assaults, and the famous therapy technique were all too disturbing for a great number of people. At the heart of it all is Malcolm McDowell's Alex Delage. Very much the driving force behind much of what has made the movie so infamous over the years, Delage has become an iconic villain, and it all started with the very first scene of the movie. Seeing Alex in the famous costume is one part iconic and one part creepy, as he stares out to the camera for a good 90 seconds or so. It's sinister, it sets the tone for the whole movie, and it's one of the most memorable moments of the classic film even now. Number 6. The Thing. By the very nature of the movie, audiences aren't supposed to know who to trust when watching The Thing. It's what the entire narrative is based on and is what makes the ending of the movie so ambiguous and iconic. This actually starts from the very first scene when the shape-shifting alien is first introduced, though on first viewing it's not immediately apparent where this bizarre creature comes from. All naive audiences see is a poor dog running what must have been a marathon through the Arctic snow with a helicopter trying to kill it. Of course, it doesn't take long for the movie to show exactly what the dog is, ultimately making sense of the initial chase. It wasn't actually a cute fluffy mutt, it was in fact an alien that would eventually see to the death of most people in the movie. The Thing could have almost started with a hideous transformation of the dog into the alien's true form, but first showing it being chased so vigorously immediately produced intrigue and mystery, and ultimately established that absolutely no one, or nothing in fact, was to be trusted. Number 5. Jaws. As far as iconic thrillers go, there aren't many bigger than Jaws. It can be said without hyperbole that it is surely one of the most famous movies in the history of cinema and one of the most famous villains of all time. As the title suggests, at the centre of the movie is the great white shark that causes havoc in and around the waters of Amity Island. It sparked a fear of sharks and the ocean in an entire generation, not least because of how the shark itself was portrayed. As Chrissy and her very drunk companion go skinny dipping, the former finds herself in the water alone until she's joined by the shark, who proceeds to tear her limb from limb. The scene is shot in such a way that there is no clear glimpse of the big bad, and even though the audience is well aware that it is a shark and knows what a shark looks like, the ambiguity only adds to the terror. Sometimes the scariest thing a director can do to build up such a villain is to portray the idea of them first, allowing viewers to initially torture themselves with their own imagination. Number 4. No Country for Old Men. The Coen brothers are two of the biggest names in the world of cinematic directors and have produced some truly stellar movies during their career. Arguably their best, however, came as an adaptation of Cormac McCarthy's 2005 novel No Country for Old Men. The movie is a gritty, dark thriller, and at the centre of it, alongside incredible performances from Tommy Lee Jones and Josh Brolin, is Javier Bardem. The man knows how to play a powerfully creepy villain, and bringing Anton Chigurh to life is among his best ever work. The opening scene of the movie shows Anton getting arrested, an unusual introduction for a movie's main villain, but it allows him the opportunity to brutally murder his arresting officer. The calmness, the indifference, and the complete lack of any emotion is truly harrowing, setting the tone for the character's entire journey throughout the movie. Number 3. Avengers Infinity War. How do you bring to life a villain that has been teased for the last 6 years? A villain that fans of the comic books will crucify if not done right? A villain that has to outshine every other bad guy in the history of the Marvel Cinematic Universe? The answer is you put him front and centre from the very beginning and show exactly why he should be so feared. This is exactly what the Russo brothers did with Thanos, opening Infinity War with his assault on the Asgardian refugee ship. The directors had teased in the build-up to the movie that fans would know within the first 5 minutes why Thanos was such a big deal, and they didn't disappoint. A decimated ship, Thor on his knees, Loki and Heimdall dead, and the Hulk completely embarrassed. Yes, this was going to be Thanos' movie, alright, and what a way to start. The Mad Titan was the main character of Avengers Infinity War, and clearly the writers and directors understood the importance of separating him from the rest of the MCU villain pack early. The Russos wanted to make Thanos as close as they could get to this generation's Darth Vader, and many people would say that they well and truly pulled it off. Number 2. Inglorious Bastards. There are many hallmarks to a great Quentin Tarantino movie, from the over-the-top gory violence to the eccentric and exaggerated characters, and of course the usual gratuitous shot of bare female feet. These aren't all, however. Tarantino, in spite of all of his action sequences, is a master of suspense and dialogue, and loves to open his movies that way. Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction both kicked off his career in such a way, but arguably one of the greatest cinematic opening scenes in history is that of Inglorious Bastards. Taking place in 1941 German-occupied France, the scene introduced Christoph Waltz as Colonel Hans Lander. As one of the most ruthless of the Führer's team of hunters, it doesn't take Lander too long to discover that this particular family is harbouring fugitives from the state. It's the slow build, the deliberate dialogue delivered so eloquently by Waltz, and the calmness in which such horrifying matters are discussed that make this scene so damn compelling. Even on a rewatch, it's impossible to take in without that pit in your stomach, and the immediate hatred created for Lander in the space of just 10 minutes. Number 1. The Dark Knight. Whilst Batman Begins brought a fresh new caped crusader to screens, very different to that of George Clooney 10 years earlier, the movie focused heavily on Bruce Wayne, his story, and his transformation into a vigilante. This allowed for the sequel to play around a little more with its villain. Going into The Dark Knight, audiences were by now familiar with Christian Bale's new take on Batman, but not yet with Heath Ledger's Joker. Christopher Nolan took this opportunity to open what is arguably the greatest comic book movie ever with an introduction to the new Clown Prince of Crime. Heath Ledger's performance as the Joker is iconic, it's infamous, and it's widely regarded as one of the finest performances in the history of the entire genre, and it all starts with a bank robbery in which each member of the crew takes out the next until there's just one man left. Leaning in real close to the camera, removing his mask to reveal his face, and uttering the still bone-chilling "whatever doesn't kill you simply makes you stranger" immediately lets audiences know that this movie and this Joker were going to be different. It was the best possible start to the film, and one that more than delivered on the promise of an unhinged and chaotic villain. And that's the list. Let us know what you thought of this video down in the comments below, and which of these villains' introductions did you like the most. And whilst you're down there, in fact, let us know of other opening scenes with villains in that we missed. Make sure you like this video, share it with your friends, subscribe and hit that notification bell. I've been Cy for What Culture, and have a good week.